So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today on Signal for Help Responders supporting someone who is experiencing abuse. We are so pleased today to have our speakers with us from the Canadian Women's Foundation, sharing their knowledge and information about this program that has been rolled out across the country. Before we begin, I'd like to provide our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territory of a number of First Nations and acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. As with all our other webinars, our microphones and videos are turned off. We have our chat box enabled, so you can, as I mentioned, post any comments that you might have or chat with a colleague around a topic that we're discussing today. If you have a question as the speakers are presenting, please post that in the Q&A, and we will have question and answer period at the end of the presentation today. As I mentioned, we have our ASL interpreters with us, and you can also enable the closed captioning option on the bottom of your screen if you would like to enable that as well. We will be recording the webinar today. It will be posted on our website within the next couple of days, along with any of the resources that are shared within the chat box with you today from our colleagues. And we will be asking you to complete a short evaluation form as a follow-up. So there'll be a pop-up menu. And if you don't have a chance to do that, we do send it a follow-up email with the link to view the recording, as well as all the materials that are posted with today's webinar on our website, and a reminder to do the evaluation at that time as well. And just a reminder, we do remind individuals that this is a public forum and we respect people's privacy and confidentiality. If you're encountering a specific situation that you would like some further assistance with, we would encourage you to reach out to us directly, and we'll provide our contact information at the end of the presentation. We can have a private discussion with you to get you to the right resource and navigate some options for you to resolve the situation that you might be encountering. For those who haven't joined us previously, just to let you know a little bit about our organization, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario has been around for over 20 years. We're a nonprofit organization, but our vision really hasn't changed significantly because we are focused on ensuring that seniors are free from ageism, abuse, have their human rights respected and advanced, and we do a lot of work to make sure that that vision is accomplished. We also support and implement the Ontario Strategy to Combat Elder Abuse, which is funded through the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility. And we've been doing the implementation of that strategy since 2003. With that, we do a lot of education and training to frontline providers and seniors groups to let them know options around prevention and intervention to protect the older adults in our communities and strengthen our community partnerships. And today's webinar is just one of those partnerships that we want to strengthen and advance the information about gender-based violence to everyone so we can better protect the safety and well-being of older adults within our communities. So with that, I'd like to provide just a short introduction to our speakers today. As I mentioned, they both work with the Canadian Women's Foundation, and Hélène is a communication, sorry, my screen is just going stupid here. She's the manager of the community activation on the Signal for Help campaign at the Women's Foundation. She's typically located in Montreal, but she's currently coming to us today from LA, which apparently is very sunny today. Over the past decade, or the last decade, she's worked as a journalist, a translator, and a feminist researcher specializing in sexual trauma. She holds a master's degree in both journalism and gender studies from the University of Western Ontario. She's being supported today by Miranda, who is a communications coordinator for the program that we're speaking of today. Her work focuses on the distribution of the Signal for Help resources and connecting with organizations to improve awareness of this campaign. And she is currently located in Montreal, where she's joining us from today. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Hélène, and she will provide our presentation for today. Oops.
Thank you so much, Rianne, for that beautiful introduction. I'll start by sharing my screen. Okay, and as I get started here, I will remind you that as Rianne said, my colleague Miranda is here in the background supporting, so I may not always be able to attend to the chat as I'm speaking, but if you do have questions, concerns, if there's any issues coming up, please feel free to put them in the chat, and Rianne or Miranda, I'm sure, will be able to help you there. As we get started, again, my name is Hélène. I work with the Canadian Women's Foundation, and that is Canada's public foundation for gender justice and equality. So we advance this by growing support for grassroots feminist action, partnering with communities and organizations to improve conditions, and building diverse leadership and knowledge for sustainable change. Since 1991, our generous donors and supporters have contributed more than $185 million to fund over 3,000 life-transforming programs throughout the country. These programs address root causes of the most critical issues that impact diverse women, girls, and two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people who face the greatest barriers and have the least access to relevant services. Rianne just gave us a wonderful land acknowledgement. I'll add my own here. So the work of the Canadian Women's Foundation and the organizations we support takes place on traditional First Nations, Métis, Inuit territories. And we're grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this land. But we recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. We need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. This presentation today will give you an overview of the Signal for Help. We'll talk about the campaign and its role in addressing gender-based violence. You should know that this presentation was originally developed specifically for the workplace context, so you will notice some emphasis in parts on the workplace. But we've also adapted it today to focus more broadly on how to respond to gender-based violence in community settings as well. We'll also go into a few tips and final takeaways on responding to gender-based violence as a Signal for Help responder. Before we begin, I would like to give you a gentle reminder that we'll be discussing topics related to gender-based violence today. Though we keep things very high level, you never know what could be difficult or triggering for each person. So please participate as you feel comfortable. Know that you can always take a break if you need to. And if you do need additional support during or following the presentation, you can find support services listed on our website. So you can go to canadianwomen.org and search support services, or my colleague Miranda will also post the link to that website in the chat. And you will find Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario listed under the Ontario tab there as well. I'd like to start with a story to give you a heads up again about the content. This is a story about gender-based violence. But I'd like you to imagine that you're spending time with someone that you see every day. You may be volunteering or working together, or maybe you're just meeting up for a weekly coffee date. Imagine being close with this person or getting close to this person, developing a great relationship, eventually becoming great friends. Now imagine meeting up with her one day and seeing her fallen face, asking her if she's okay, and her telling you that her partner hit her last night and that she was so scared. Maybe for years he'd said mean things to her, but it had been a long time since he was physically aggressive. Maybe she tells you she's never told anyone that this happens and that she imagines her family suspects something, but that no one ever talks about it. Would you know what to do or say in this situation? How would you respond? I'm asking you this because many people don't know how to respond when they get the sense that a friend, a coworker, or a family member is facing abuse. And sometimes we focus so heavily on the person facing abuse that we don't pay enough attention to the people around them. And sometimes we focus, and sometimes we do so, and we forget what tools are needed for these folks to respond well. So I'd like to share what the Canadian Women's Foundation is doing to help, because we know that it's perfectly normal to feel upset, to feel uncertain when someone you know is facing abuse. But we can all learn to respond in better, more helpful ways. And we believe that we can all become competent, compassionate responders. So as we start this important conversation, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question. This is going to be a poll question that Rianne will help us get up on your Zoom feed here. You can answer this question through the poll. It's anonymous. So I'll read out the question and you'll see it in front of you as well. If someone told you they were facing abuse, would you know how to respond or support them in a judgment-free way? So please feel free to answer that. And we'll come back to this question a little later on. I'll just give you all a second to answer. Okay, so coming back to the signal for help here. This is a tool to help those experiencing gender-based violence, again, created by the Canadian Women's Foundation. It's a simple one-handed gesture someone can use without leaving a digital trace to communicate they need someone to safely check in and support them. So I can't see myself in the screen right now, but hopefully you'll be able to see my hand as I demonstrate. It looks like this. You put your palm up, you tuck your thumb, and you trap your thumb. You can also see it on the image on the slide here. So we launched this in this campaign in April 2020, and it was in response to an increased risk in gender-based violence and an increased rise in video calls like this one in the COVID-19 pandemic. Gender-based violence includes intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, emotional abuse, and these are the types of violence that women, girls, and gender diverse people are statistically at the highest risk of experiencing. And we'll talk more about that a little later on. Within months of launching the campaign, it quickly went viral. It spread all over social media. It made headlines in cases where the signal was used to help someone get the support they needed. And I have a video here to show you its viral journey and the impact it had. Hopefully the sound works. If we have issues, please let me know in the chat.
Lockdown led to a dramatic increase in domestic violence, with abusers constantly monitoring devices and listening in on calls.
This signal for help.
It's a campaign by the Canadian Women's Foundation.
We developed a hand signal that can be slipped into a video call.
We used this global shift in video calling and invented a new way for women facing domestic abuse that they could call for help without leaving a digital trace. You face your palm to the camera, you tuck your thumb, and you trap your thumb. It means I need help and I need you to check in with me safely.
We launched with organic posts, designed with simple instructions on how to use the signal if you need help and what to do if you see it being used. It linked to a social media toolkit that an army of over 200 women's groups instantly downloaded, customized, and shared. Then we followed up with a PSA.
I know your mom's a great baker, so it should be good.
Exploding on TikTok, it became social activism on a global scale. Amplified by influential voices, the signal has made headlines in over 45 countries.
Reported by women who use the signal to seek out help.
Syrian YouTuber Saif used the hand signal on her channel, triggering her subscribers to alert the authorities. Followed by this global news story from the US.
Northbrook is in police custody this morning, accused of abducting a teenager.
Authorities say a hand signal she learned from TikTok may very well have saved her life.
In Spain, police detained a man after they saw a woman use the signal during a routine traffic stop. Another man was detained after a woman used the signal in a healthcare clinic. Mobilized by a global community, the signal for help continues to be recognized as the silent call for those who need help.
So today, the signal for help has been shared around the world and in more than 50 countries and 20 languages. In Canada, 40% of people have seen information about the signal for help, and 10% have actually used the signal for help or seen it used. It's won more than 40 awards, including a Governor General's Innovation Award. So we saw that the campaign clearly resonated with people. And we're so relieved to hear these great stories where someone used the signal and got the help they needed. But we also know that for every instance that we hear about, there are many we don't know about and that don't make the news. Because most gender-based violence happens in private between people who know each other, and many people facing abuse might not be safe enough to use a signal. In the end, we know that a signal is only as effective as its response, and we have to be more proactive than that. We have to be responsive to any warning sign and any signal of abuse and prevent it before it happens. Go.
Locked.
And that's why we launched the Signal for Help Responder campaign, to give people tools and training to support survivors of violence and learn how to have judgment-free conversations. We now have more than 70,000 people that have joined us, and most of us know we need this learning, right? 64% of people in Canada know a woman who has experienced sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, but only 1 in 6 people feel very confident that they would know what to say or do to support someone dealing with sexual or emotional abuse. And for physical abuse, it's 1 in 5 people. 90% of people say everyone has a responsibility to end gender-based violence, but over 50% are afraid to help. 46% say the issue feels too big, and 23% say intimate partner violence is none of their business if it doesn't directly involve them. So what we see is that there's a gap between our knowledge, between our values, and our confidence and competence to respond. So this learning journey builds your confidence and competence, and our ultimate goal here is to transform our culture of stigma and silence around abuse to a culture of support for survivors. According to Statistics Canada, in 2018, 44% of women reported experiencing some form of psychological, physical, or sexual violence by an intimate partner in their lifetimes. And frankly, we know that the true number is likely even higher than that. We also know for older women specifically that they face disproportionate rates of family violence, including violence from spouses, children, siblings, and other family members. Elder abuse can take on many forms, including physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse, as well as neglect and abandonment. Again, according to Statistics Canada, older women are victims in 58% of family violence cases in Canada, and they're twice as likely to be victims of intimate partner violence than older men. Now, in the workplace and in the community context, we know that people don't always talk about gender-based violence. And they don't always know how to respond to it. In a workplace, it might seem too personal to talk about. People might blame the victim and make the person who was hurt feel judged. And the person facing abuse may feel that they'll face negative consequences for disclosing abuse. What we do know, however, is that people do disclose to their friends and coworkers. And so you might just get the sense that someone you know is experiencing it. Gender-based violence like intimate partner abuse and sexual assault and harassment and emotional abuse can and do show up in our workplaces and communities every day. In terms of workplace survey research, we know that 35% of respondents reported knowing at least one coworker who they believe experienced domestic violence. 54% of those who faced domestic violence said that at least one type of abuse occurred near or at their workplace. And 82% of them disclosed the situation to a coworker. Now, these numbers, of course, don't even include those who experienced workplace gender-based violence, like workplace sexual harassment or assault. But the toll on those who are facing this is significant. There are physical, emotional, and mental impacts, and these impacts reach the workplace too. So for workers who face domestic abuse at home, 82% report a negative impact on their work performance. Now, I'd like to share some slides sent to us by Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. I'm sure that they can speak more specifically to these statistics if you have questions. But again, really important to note that older women ages 55 and older continue to be at the greatest risk of femicide. And you can see this report here, so feel free to look at it afterwards, and maybe Brianne can share that in the chat as well, or share it afterwards in an email. And again, violence against older women is really important to emphasize in this context. We see here the 58% of family violence cases that I mentioned earlier, and some other statistics. So please feel free to ask some questions at the end that I'm sure Brianne can help us with. And again, it's really important to note how this violence affects specific communities in different ways. In Canada, we also have workplace and labor laws and policies that give us the mandate to address gender-based violence in the workplace context again. And data confirms that this is the ethical and smart thing to do. It builds safety and better workplaces for all. The project of building gender-based violence responsive workplaces is one of excellent leadership, action, policy, practices, strategic planning, training programs, and worker action. So all of these things have to be in place in order for the effort to be effective. Today, we're going to focus on individual action so that you can be either a judgment-free coworker or a community leader that we all need in our lives. But let's start by defining gender-based violence. So what is gender-based violence? Well, it's the type of abuse that women, girls, and two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people are, again, at the highest risk of experiencing. It can be very difficult to leave an abusive relationship, and people can stay in abusive relationships for many years. Anyone can be abused, no matter their background, their identity, their circumstance. But again, it's important to emphasize that women, girls, and gender diverse people are at the highest risk of gender-based violence, including intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, and emotional abuse. Some are at even higher risks due to the additional discrimination and barriers that they face. So this can include women with disabilities, Indigenous women, racialized women, trans and non-binary people, and women who are unhoused or underhoused. People facing abuse might not always have the same access to services that meet their needs. So for example, people in rural or remote areas might have a harder time accessing services or might have fewer services that they can access. This violence also can take lots of different forms. It can take physical forms, emotional forms. It can include things like name calling, hitting, pushing, blocking, stalking or criminal harassment, rape, sexual assault, control, and manipulation. It can also take unique forms for different people. So for someone with a disability, it can include taking away their assistive device. For someone older, it can include their partner withholding care, refusing to help them shower or go to the bathroom, for example. For someone who is racialized, it can include racist name calling. For someone who's part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, it could include threatening to out them to friends, family, or coworkers. And again, for somebody who has no money, it could include threatening to kick them out so that they have nowhere to go. No matter what, of course, it's important to say that everybody deserves to feel safe. Everyone should feel loved and cared for, and violence and abuse are never acceptable. And many forms of this abuse are against the law. In the workplace, we have workplace legislation and policy best practices that say that employers have the responsibility to prevent and address violence and harassment that can happen at work, including many types of gender-based violence. And it can happen again between people in a romantic relationship. It can happen in family settings, between friends, coworkers, acquaintances, and strangers. It often occurs in private places between people who know each other, and it can happen in long-term relationships where people have been together for years. To go back to the workplace context, we know that this violence can happen between coworkers as well, between workers and customers. It can happen at home and affect you as you're trying to work. And risk of abuse can also spill into the workplace. For example, an abuser can come to the workplace, can make many phone calls to a person as they're trying to work. And then, of course, in the work from home setting, where work and home life blend into each other, then abuse can play out in even more unique ways. Many people experience it, unfortunately, and many people perpetuate it, but abuse is not inevitable. People do it to other people and they can stop, but we all have to play a part in ending it. Okay, so how do we respond to someone using the signal or when someone discloses in any way that they may be experiencing violence? There are three main things we want to bring up. The first is to reach out to them safely and discreetly. The second is to be supportive, to focus on the person being hurt, listen to them, and let them lead, and respond without judgment. And finally, we want to refer them to support services or resources as needed, either within the workplace or within the community. I do want to note before we continue that the signal for help signifies reach out to me safely. That's what it means. And the person using it might want you to call an emergency service, but it's important not to assume that that's what they want or need in the moment. You want to reach out to them and let them take the lead. That said, of course, if you see someone using the signal for help in public or out of a window or a door, then calling 911 or an emergency service is the appropriate response. There are many different ways that we could reach out or connect with a friend, a family member, or a coworker in a safe, discreet way, depending on your relationship to each other. You might be able to have a private conversation with each other. You may be able to book a meeting or have a coffee with them in a private space. You may be able to talk to them by phone, email, or messaging. So just use the option that makes sense for you in your situation. If you reach out to them by phone, call them personally and start by asking them if they're alone. So, for example, you could ask, is this a good time to talk? Is anyone home? Should I call back later? But be ready to respond if you think they might not be safe to talk just then. For example, saying something like, oh, someone's trying to get through to me. I need to call you back. You also want to ask questions that can be answered by a yes or a no. For example, would you like me to call a service or a shelter on your behalf? Do you need our employee assistance number? Should I look for services that might help you and call you back? Would you like me to call 911? If you reach out to them via a message or by email, you can ask general questions like, how are you doing? Get in touch when you can and I'll book a meeting. It's good to remember that people in violent homes and relationships might be closely monitored. So the person abusing them may watch where they go, who they call or text, what they do on social media, and more. These options can help you find out what's wrong in a safer way. And showing judgment-free support is really important, no matter how someone expresses they need it. They might not use the signal for help to communicate. But no matter how they communicate, they still need to know that you'll help them feel cared for, supported, and unashamed if they decide to tell you what they're going through. So here are some helpful tips to keep in mind. You want to focus again on the person being hurt. Your job in this case is to support them, So make sure you're not putting your anger, your shock, or your sadness or fear first in the conversation. For example, you might feel shock if the person who is telling you that they're being abused has been in that relationship for a very long time. It's okay to feel that shock, but the conversation with this person is not the place to express the shock. It's also good to remember that everyone copes with abuse differently. So they might do a lot of things differently than you would. That's okay. You want to be there to support them as they explore what works for them. Focusing on the person also means maybe parking any rationalizations or explanations that you might have about the person's current state. Don't forget that a person can experience things like, for example, dementia or frustration or being angry about loss of independence, and also be experiencing abuse at the same time. You also want to listen and let them lead. So instead of telling them what you would do or what you think that they should do, ask them how you can best support them. And finally, be judgment-free. So instead of saying things like, what did you do? Or how did you make them mad? Or why don't you leave? Or you chose this relationship. Maybe try saying things like, it's not your fault. I'm here for you. How are you doing right now? There are also many services that can help someone experiencing abuse. Many of these services are free and open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and many can provide help in lots of different languages. So you can start by looking at what's available in your community, such as local shelters, counseling services, crisis lines, and more. These are the programs that we support at the foundation. And it's good to remember that you don't need to move into a shelter to talk to a shelter counselor. You can always call a crisis line and ask a question about a situation. This is what these folks are here for. They're there to talk to you and support you how you need it. And so you don't have to be in an emergency situation to make that call. I also want to highlight Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, which is another great resource if you're looking for services specific to older adults. You can find them at eapon.ca. I'll let Rhiannon or Miranda pop that link in the chat. And if you have a workplace, then it's good to also look into what it offers. Is there a good employee assistance program? Are there helpful human resources programs or people or materials that you can familiarize yourself with? So learn what's relevant and available to you and to an employee dealing with abuse. Now, we also have a Signal for Help podcast that I want to mention here, and I really appreciate what survivors and experts told us on this special podcast series. It's called Signal for Help, and it's produced and hosted by award-winning journalist Media Girlfriend. So we've got 6 episodes, and over the course of these episodes, we explore how everyday people can better support survivors of gender-based violence. Every episode features incredible stories, actionable tools as well for listeners to support someone in their own life. And you can listen to the series wherever you get your podcast content, or you can go on the Canadian Women's Foundation website and get it there. I do want to remind you this is a series that includes stories of gender-based violence, so do listen with care. And I'll play a short clip from it just to give you an idea.
What can a bystander do? Educate yourselves. Always educate yourselves. We can ensure that we are safe people to disclose stuff that we don't disclose to hardly anyone. We can be accepting and compassionate. That's the opposite of being judgmental, right? And we need a strong, dependable, trustworthy circle of support.
Okay, so that was one of our guests, Sherry, in that clip. And you can find that full episode again, either on the Canadian Women's Foundation website or wherever you get your podcasts. And we do also have another podcast that I want to mention. It's called All Right Now What? And this one explores issues and stories that seem to just keep resurfacing, things that make you wonder, what's this about? Why is this still happening? How is it possible we haven't fixed this issue yet? And on there, we talk about strategies for change that will move us closer to our goal of gender justice. So again, that podcast is called All Right Now What? And you can find it on your favorite podcast app or by visiting canadianwomen.org/podcast. And I will let Miranda pop that link in the chat as well. Okay, so now I'd like to try a little scenario with you. This is a scenario based on what we've learned so far. And the scenario is you invite your friend or your coworker to go to coffee with you. And when you're in line for coffee, she says, "I hope my husband doesn't find out I've gone out without asking him." She looks nervous and says, "I shouldn't have said anything. I always say the wrong thing." So based on what you've learned so far, how would you respond? You pick the response that you think is most helpful. And I'm going to invite you to list the response that you would choose in the chat. Miranda will post this question in the chat. So there are 3 options for what you could say. Number 1 would be, you shouldn't have to ask for permission. You should stand up to him. Number 2, I'm glad you said something. How can I support you? Or number 3, I speak my mind and don't let my partner disrespect me. I'll give you a moment to think about it and give myself a moment to open the chat and see your responses. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of 2s. Yeah, great. Yeah, you're all brilliant. So as it seems like you've all guessed, in this situation, number 2, or I'm glad you said something, how can I support you, is the most helpful response. And maybe it can seem kind of easy in these scenarios, but I think if we're really honest, I can see myself wanting to see option number 1, and even at times number 3. But again, talking about what should be isn't always helpful in these moments. It can make someone feel really judged and blamed for the way their relationship is. And abusive relationships are often like this, right? Where people feel controlled and watched, and their power is taken away, their agency is taken away, and they might be told to say or do the wrong thing. So it can weigh really heavily on them. When you say something like, "Thank you for telling me, and I'm here to support you," it can be such a big relief for someone facing abuse. And even if they don't want to talk to you about it just then, they'll get a sense that you will be a kind person to talk to when they are ready to talk. Just remember, for someone facing abuse, figuring things out can take a long time. So you might need to have more than one conversation with them. But your role as a signal for help responder is to stay safe and stay supportive, and just be there as they explore what works for them. Finally, what is the workplace's role specifically in addressing gender-based violence? So we've focused on what an individual can do to support someone either in their workplace or in their community. But I do want to emphasize the key role of the workplace here. So employers have a duty to ensure all employees have a safe and healthy workplace. And this includes protecting employees from various forms of violence. So some regions, such as Ontario and Manitoba, specifically name domestic and family violence in their occupational health and safety legislation. And when workplaces get proactive and intentional about preventing and ending gender-based violence, there are so many benefits that result from that. We know that the effort builds better work culture, it improves employee trust and productivity, it helps leaders take on stronger supportive mentoring stances, and it helps workplaces better meet their gender equity and safety goals. But again, like I said earlier, to be effective, we need to see changes happen on a structural level in areas such as human resources, policies and practices, commitments from leadership, employee training, and strategic planning. So I'm going to queue up another poll for you. This is almost the same poll as what you answered at the start. And if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I asked you a poll question to find out how comfortable you were responding to someone who is facing abuse. So now I'm curious to know, now that we've had this conversation, if I asked you the same question again, how would you feel now? So after everything we just talked about today, if someone they told you they were facing abuse, how would you rank your knowledge about how to support them in a judgment-free way? So I'll give you a moment to respond to that poll. Okay. And thank you for doing that. As you're wrapping up, I will emphasize some of our other resources here. This is a big topic, and learning never happens all at once. So we really like to think about the Signal for Help as a journey that we encourage you to join and that you can start joining today. So after this event, we're going to share our Signal for Help workplace, or Signal for Help guide, my apologies, which summarizes kind of everything we talked about today. And in addition to that learning, you can also sign up as a Signal for Help responder personally at signalresponder.ca. I will let Miranda post that link in the chat. We also have a workplace-specific Signal for Help responder sign up that you can take place in, and that is quite easy. It's signalresponder.ca/work. So I'll let Miranda share both of those links if you're interested in joining that. When you do, you receive even more informative material. It can include blog posts, quizzes, and information to help you learn more. And again, more than 70,000 people have already joined us, so we're really excited about that. You can also enroll in our Signal for Help Responder mini course. This is a free and flexible online course that we made, and we distilled some of the most important topics on gender-based violence prevention and support into short, easy modules that can be completed at your own pace, at your own schedule. These modules are 3 to 7 minutes long each, so it's a really accessible platform. And there's a module specifically for the workplace context, if you're interested in that, called How Do I Respond at Work? And you can sign up to that mini course at learn.signalforhelpresponder.ca. Miranda will share that in the chat as well. And finally, I already talked about our podcast, but please don't forget to check it out. It's called Signal for Help. And there you can hear directly from survivors and experts about how to support someone facing abuse. Now more than ever, we really need to come together to support people facing gender-based violence so no one feels silenced and alone. And on that note, I'd like to show you one last video. This is our most recent PSA that I think is quite powerful, so I'll play that for you.
Hi, Jim. Yes, we are live on the scene now. Friends and family report they haven't heard from the woman in weeks.
I had to see what was going on.
What happened?
I checked in on my neighbor when I knew her husband was out.
Numerous texts and calls had not been returned.
She was a bit hesitant at first, but she eventually started to open up. We kept chatting. Told her I was there for her.
Authorities suspect she was being forced to stay home.
Then she said she needed help.
Relatives said that they knew something was wrong.
I just knew something was wrong.
But they didn't get involved.
So I got her in touch with the right support.
In the end, it was unfortunately too late.
In the end, she got to safety. Found a place to stay. I'm just glad I knew how to help.
So thank you all so much for listening. All the resources we mentioned today, we'll be sending Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario afterwards, and they can share that with you all in an email. If anyone has questions, if anybody has feedback, I'd love to take some time now to hear them. And maybe the last link we can share in the chat here is our webpage, which is signalforhelp.ca. Or if you're interested in the workplace context, you can go to signalforhelp.ca/work. So on that note, I will stop sharing so I can see everyone and invite questions or feedback.
That was amazing presentation, Hélène. I know I learned a few new things in terms of the response. I think the program is outstanding, and I was really impressed with the outreach that it has, not only within Canada, but across the country, based on the headlines that you were providing, and the videos are so impactful. So I commend the Canadian Women's Foundation for the work that you're doing and to continue to do so. And I know that our organization, I was just chatting to say that we'll help promote that within our training as well, because there's some really good tips and resources that you've provided in this to help all of us in the work that we're doing. I think often we don't think about older adults in this context, and which is why I really wanted to invite you here today, because we think about younger women, but we know just based on stats and what you've told us today that older women and men also can be victims of gender-based violence, which brings me to one of the questions that was posted around men. Is the program addressing men? And we know that women are the ones that are victimized most often. And I know that that's where the focus is because of this unfortunate statistics. But does this program relate to men, and what what also is being done around the gender-based violence in relation to males?
Yes, thank you. Great question. So absolutely, we should emphasize that gender-based violence and abuse can affect anybody, regardless of their identity. I do want to emphasize that when we look at the statistics, we know that women, girls, and gender diverse people are the most at risk of this violence. So it's important to have space for both of these truths. We, of course, work at the Canadian Women's Foundation. So our organization is focused on the experiences of gender diverse people, women and girls. But there are organizations that focus specifically on men that you can certainly look into online. Off the top of my head, I think of the White Ribbon Campaign, which is run by men. That's a great resource. And certainly we can look into some other ones if folks are interested, but I would refer you to the support services page of the Canadian Women's Foundation for other organizations that might focus more specifically on violence as it relates to men.
Yeah, thank you. We hosted a joint conference last fall with Women Act and the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, and we did have representatives from organizations that support men. So I would encourage people to go to our website. I can put it in the chat in a minute for some of those resources. And the White Ribbon Campaign is an amazing program, and they do a lot of work supporting men and educating men also around gender-based violence. So thank you. There was another question in regards to the information. I know that you mentioned it in your presentation about vulnerability, but is there information relating to race, specifically Black communities?
Yeah, another great question. It's really important to take an intersectional approach when we talk about abuse and gender-based violence, and intersectional meaning considering how power affects people of different identities differently. And certainly Black women, girls, and gender diverse people are more at risk than white women, girls, and gender diverse people are. Also Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people in Canada are at a lot higher risk. So it's really important to emphasize that. So I would say in our mini course, we tackle this more specifically there. We have some modules that give you examples of different types of abuse and how it might show up in different communities. So I really encourage people to look into that mini course if they're interested in it. And I would also say that if folks are interested in working with communities that support Black girls and women and gender diverse people more specifically, we support a lot of those organizations at the Canadian Women's Foundation. So I would invite you to, again, look at those support services page, and you'll find a lot of them there. And if you do have trouble finding them, then you can maybe connect with Rianne or send the Canadian Women's Foundation an email, and we can put some links together for you there as well.
Great. There was also a question, and I guess maybe just more of a comment around the population, about underreporting for the men's population. Is it that the population, just a comment, is that population at a greater risk due to underreporting of the men population? But I don't think that's the case. I think, the rates of victimization are much higher for women, but maybe you could just make a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, underreporting is likely an issue when it comes to violence against men. What we do know, I think, in terms of the data, is that also men experience a lot of gender-based violence from other men. When we talk about gender-based violence, it's an umbrella term. It includes a lot of different things. So that it could be, for example, violence that is aimed at someone's perceived or real sexual orientation. So homophobic violence, for example, counts as gender-based violence. And so it's an umbrella. There's so much different kind of violence that's included under that umbrella term. And it's really important to emphasize that violence. Again, I would say our organization at the Canadian Women's Foundation is focused on girls and women and gender diverse people. But there are so many great organizations. And again, I'm going to say the White Ribbon Campaign is the one that always kind of comes to top of mind for me. But as Rianne said, if you're looking really specifically to delve into this issue for men, there are definitely organizations that work with men specifically that you can reach out to. For sure. I don't see, I'm just checking. I don't see any other specific questions related to the program. The one thing I was just wondering, if you, in your presentation, referred to the workplace environment, and so what are the approaches, or how do people get involved in getting training in the workplace for, sort of promoting this program or their organization? Is it, do you do it virtually, or do you go to organizations? Do you reach out to them to let them know that this program is available? Yeah, great question. So we've been trying to amplify and promote all of these resources that we offer as broadly as we can. Some folks here might have seen some of our ads popping up on social media. We have emails that we try to send out. So we're really trying to get the message out there, because all of the resources that we offer are free. They're available to the public, and they are funded by, generously funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada. So we're really happy, and our goal is really to share this as far and wide as we can in the country. So in terms of where we do our training, yeah, definitely most of it is virtual. Most of the time we do virtual presentations. Our mini course is an online course, and we've got our guide that can be downloaded. But there's also an option to work with us on custom campaigns. So for example, if someone has a book club and they want to bring this to their book club, then we can connect. We can give you resources to bring to train you so that you can bring this to your book club or to your library or to your community groups of any kind. So we're really happy to work with people who want to bring this to their communities in different ways. And again, all of it is free. So if you go to the signalforhelp.ca webpage, you'll be able to find contact information to reach us, and lots of different options. We do also have a 16 days calendar campaign that's going to be starting soon. It's for the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which starts in November. So we will be, Rianne will be sharing that calendar with you, and we'll be sharing it as widely as we can. And we invite you to use that as well. It's going to have daily actions of things that you can do every day during the 16 days to learn more about gender-based violence in Canada. Yeah, I guess the other thing I would encourage people, if they're on their own social media platforms, is to promote the campaign that you have, in terms of going to the website to
utilize the, or reshare some of your posts as well, because you just never know who, within your friends that may maybe experiencing some of these issues, and that you could reach out to and encourage and promote that program within your family, friends, and your, your circle of individuals that you work with or are friends with, because like I say, most people may not feel comfortable coming forward. So this is a way that they know that you're there for support as well. So I'm extremely excited about learning more and promoting this program as well. Just checking the questions again. Oh yeah, we talked about the workplace as well. Someone's just asking about in the workplace, what about if the situation is the supervisor or higher being within the workplace that is the abuser? Does this program still work for that, or is there another option that you might suggest for that?
Yes, I would like to suggest another resource. So our resources really focus on abuse that's happening usually in the home or outside of work, and that somebody might talk to their colleague about it at work and they might share about it. But there's a whole nother type of violence, which is workplace violence that happens at work. And I'd love to share, if you go to, I'll put this link actually because it's a bit long, but the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, which comes out of Western University, has some great research and resources about workplace violence. So I've just put that link in the chat. Please feel free to visit that website. They have infographics, workplace resources, online training, reports, all sorts of great resources specifically about workplace violence. So I'd invite you to take a look at that.
Yes, the Learning Network has a lot of resources. We actually work with the Center for Violence Against Women and Children a lot in terms of our work too, to reach out to the older adults sector. So, which is great. The other program, just for people who may not know, is the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. Also has a project on older women, 55 plus, and I put the link in there for you to access some of the information and resources as they are rolled out and promoted. You can find those on their website as well. So our organization's supporting that project. So there's a lot of work being done in the area of gender-based violence and slowly into the older adult sector, as you mentioned as well. I do have a few, I'm not sure. Oh, somebody's asking if the links. Yes, I will post all the links that were shared because I know you can't, it's hard to keep track of all the information being posted. So all the links and recording and PowerPoint will be shared on our website after the webinar, and probably in a couple of days once we get everything uploaded and available. We encourage you to please check out the Canadian Women's Foundation website for all the access to the courses and the podcasts. If you missed something that Hélène has mentioned here today, as well as our website, eapo.ca, because we also have a number of resources to support older adults. And if you are in a situation, as I mentioned previously, that you'd like to reach out for support, please reach out to us either by our direct phone number or our website to contact us to get some further information and guidance. I do have just a couple more slides just to show, if people bear with me. I just want to make sure everybody can see the 211 slide. You see that, Hélène?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have to see something's strange on my slide. So yes, I just wanted to let people know, like on our website, you can also search resources through the 211 database that's integrated into our site. So by where you work or where you live, and the services that you're looking for, so you can access that as well. And I'm going to skip some of I have some polling questions, but I'll do that at the very end. And I just want to let people know that also today is Ageism Awareness Day. So for those who are, we're all aging, but it affects everyone. particularly older adults. So there's a campaign that's actually happening this week, but today is Ageism Awareness Day. So we are trying to promote people to decrease that stigma and discrimination against older adults. So there's a campaign as well to promote that. We also, as I mentioned, we also have more presentations that will be webinars that are coming up. So look at our website, and we'll get, if you're signed up to our e-newsletter, you'll get promotions about all the new upcoming webinars and events that are happening. And as Hélène said, in December is the 12 days of activism. So we also get involved in that, but pay attention also to the Canadian Women's Foundation, because of a great campaign that goes very wide in terms of getting support from promoting the messaging in terms of prevention and action. So we'd encourage everyone to do that. This is my contact information if people want to reach out to myself after the presentation. We'd be more than happy to, like I say, to assist or give you information or resources that you might need. So there is a couple other polling, just quick questions that just asking people again around knowledge from today's webinar. Just wondering if what people's feedback is, if they've gained new knowledge around elder abuse and gender-based violence, the topic that we're talking about today. Just gives us an idea of the impact that has been made. And I know just based on the other polling question that we did, that a lot of people have learned a lot from your presentation today, Hélène. So we thank you for.
Happy to hear it.
Yes, no, it's nice to have an impact. And a lot of these presentations we could speak probably all day on or more. So trying to pack everything into an hour is much appreciated, because we're just trying, it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the information that we are trying to get out to our community. I'm going to just ask two more questions. One is about the launcher, about how you can use this information, hopefully that people will be able to utilize this, as you're talking about, when someone does disclose, because I think often we're very hesitant about getting involved. As you mentioned, there's and starting that conversation can be so difficult about which words to use. And I think you gave some really good examples about how do we start that conversation with someone, because if you open the door, what does that mean? And I think, part of the work that we do of a program is called It's Not Right, Neighbors, Friends, and Families of Older Adults, is to start the conversation knowing that you don't have to solve it, as you mentioned, but supporting them along the journey that the older person or the individual wants as they disclose, and supporting along that journey.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'm just going to do one more polling question, and then we can stop. And the last one is the tools and resources that were shared today. As I mentioned, not only with the links that we've shared today, but also the Canadian Women's Foundation podcast and the course, which I've signed up for and started, which is really great. There's the animated videos. There's a lot of interactive materials there for you to gain further knowledge and education on the issue as well. So I just would like to thank yourself and Miranda for your back end support, as well as our ASL interpreters today for helping and being engaged in this important conversation today. And again, if anybody needs to reach out, please reach out to either the foundation or EAPO, and we would be happy to further assist. And I know there's lots of nice comments about the presentation today. So thank you both. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. And I wish everyone a happy rest of their day. And stay tuned for future webinars that we have planned for the next month and two. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhian.